Hello, everybody, and a warm welcome here to the Wine with Jimmy channel. Thank you for stopping by. This is, in fact, a series for the diploma, WSET Level 4, looking at New York State. There is the wonderful Lamoureux Landing Wine Cellars, which sits on the in between Cayuga and Seneca Lake. Really great place, making some fantastic wine, specifically things like Cabernet Franc, wonderful Chardonnay, and sparkling. So we are in this series 1, which is the introduction to New York State, and we are on part 2 of 2, looking at the wine business today. So we're going to discuss the kind of things around labeling, the key parts in terms of numbers of New York State wine, and then a little bit about sort of pre the 1976 Farm Winery Act, and then post going into today. Okay, so let's begin with looking at the labeling behind New York State wine. So this is something which is not the most riveting to teach, but of course it's technically very important. 3 things important in terms of the diploma syllabus. If an AVA, that's an American viticultural area, a geographical boundary, is mentioned, like here you've got Cayuga Lake AVA, then a minimum of 85% of the grapes that make that wine must come from that AVA. So that does mean that this could be 85% Cayuga, and then maybe 15% from the rest of the Finger Lakes, for example. It is technically allowed. The vintage, as you'll see here, the vintage, if it is stated, it will be a minimum of 95% of that stated vintage, meaning that previous vintages can be used. And the grape variety, if stated, a minimum 75%. So even though this just states Pinot Gris, could have 25% other permitted grape varieties in it. Now, with very quality-focused wineries, normally the bottom 2 are certainly 100%, and then the AVA is likely to be towards 100% to the most. So with the more kind of voluminous producers, they might start to sort of utilize these minimum percentages, but technically normally we have normally 100% typically. This, just so we are aware, the Hosmer Winery, which is a fantastic second generation winery, well worth seeking out, just closer to Cayuga Lake than Seneca Lake, making exquisite wines across the board. Certainly their Rieslings are really to behold, as well as their Cabernet Francs, and really wonderful estate, wonderful people behind it. So that is the labeling side of things. Next up, just having a look at the map again, but talking about really the total production and then the amount of wineries that we have in play across New York State. So as of the latest figures, 2022, from the New York Board of Grape Production, we are looking at 444 wineries currently across the state. 144 of those, and that's the biggest amount, are found in the Finger Lakes. That's upstate New York, south of Syracuse and Rochester, and just to the east of Buffalo, around places like Geneva and just north of Ithaca. So where you've got those collection of Finger Lakes. Then we have 82 of them in Long Island, 82 wineries down Long Island, one of the first places to really emerge due to its proximity to Manhattan, New York City. And then 59 currently in the Hudson River region. I haven't named Champlain or Lake Erie or the Niagara Escarpment. They're very small in total. Then we've got total hectareage here. Nearly 10,000 acres in Finger Lakes, so about 3,800 hectares, as you can see here. And these numbers are always interesting because I don't have exact data on what percentage is Vitis vinifera versus hybrids versus native varieties. But there is a real big focus today in the Finger Lakes on our Vitis vinifera. But some younger producers, certainly Ben at Osmote, are making some fun stuff with the native and hybrid varieties. So you do find it. So big number, that's certainly the biggest here. Long Island at about 825 hectares, and then the Hudson River region at about 100 hectares. Other places have some sizable amounts as well, but most of that will actually be non-vitis vinifera. So they're the three that really are contained within the syllabus for the diploma, talking about Finger Lakes, Long Island, and Hudson River region. So if you have any comments, any questions, any concerns, pop them in the comments section below this video. Maybe you've been to the States, maybe you've been to New York, maybe you've been to upstate New York and you've tried these wines. It'd be great to hear about your experiences. Please look at the social media as well if you want to get in touch via that means. Now, pre-1976, so before the New York Farm Winery Act of 1976 and the amendment that followed in 1978, production in New York State was very much dominated by a few large wineries which were producing large volumes of inexpensive wines, often from American vine species. This is just of the Taylor Wine Company, which was a very significant one during this time. And this is just vermouth being produced by them. And you can go and search online for any of the old sort of labels from Taylor's, but I quite like to bit this one off initially. Hammond Sport, so just off Cuca Lake, is where Taylor Wine Company was situated. And then post 1976, so the Farm Act and the amendment of 1978 allowed wineries to sell wines that they had vinified direct to consumers. So instead of going through other channels, they are now allowed to communicate and connect with their consumers. And this had some maximum amounts. There is 50,000 US gallons, which is about 190,000 liters, and that's annually. So this law completely changed the dynamics of the industry. Many new wineries, mainly quite small and family run, were established, now with, of course, a viable route to market for those. Which is fantastic. Now, the small producers use French hybrids and vitis vinifera and raise the quality of wine across the state. And with this competition suddenly emerging, big, small wineries, small families, but a mass of them, suddenly the domination of the large companies was under threat, and they had to adapt or they declined. Most sales continue here in the state to be through cellar doors, and the vast majority of wine is sold in state in New York. It's fascinating, actually. It is really quite a New York State production. Of course, producers like Hosmer that we looked at, Dr. Constantin Frank, do have very good export markets. But if you go to Connecticut, which sits just to the east of New York State, and I go there very frequently, if you go to somewhere around Hartford, for instance, and go into a liquor store, there really is only Constantin Frank that you can find on the shelves. There isn't much else. So there is very little sort of exported to another state in this area. It's very much state-run and focuses on that quite importantly. So New York City is the big sort of market for it, of course, but we are starting to see much more of an emergence around the whole of the States, Canada, and in export markets. Another great winery here, which is Fox Run, which is actually on the west side of Seneca Lake. Have a great tasting room, are really adapting the whole of their offering here, do great sort of festivals and gatherings, and some really well-made wines at Fox Run as well. So this is just to give you an idea of this emergence. It's a great place to visit. Off-season, a lot of the Finger Lakes tends to be closed down kind of Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, but then Wednesday through to Saturday, it opens up. And then on season, it's all throughout the week. This place. And today, many wineries are now being run by second or even third generation winemakers. And there is an increasing number of winemakers that have trained professionally and have worked in other key wine producing countries, leading to, of course, a much greater emergence of quality and diversity in the area. It's a really exciting time to get stuck into specifically the Finger Lakes, but other areas like Hudson River region and also Long Island, of course, amongst others. This is Megan Frank, who, of course, is from the Constantin Frank dynasty. and an excellent ambassador and winemaker for the estate. Okay, so that brings me to a conclusion of this first series. Please do join me for a now detailed look towards the Finger Lakes, of course, volumetrically and of course quality-wise, very important for New York State wine. If you have any comments, any questions and concerns, we would love to hear from you here at Wine with Jimmy. Pop them in the comments section below about your experiences in New York State and your experiences with New York State wine and the AVA areas in this. And maybe you're in an export market, maybe you're somewhere in Europe or South America and you have very little access, or you've maybe found some better access to these wines. Let us know about it. Social media at the bottom as well. And of course, if you find yourself in the UK, please come and say hi at one of my establishments for a class, a glass, or a bottle. I've been Jimmy Smith. Ciao for now. Bye-bye.